Hello, and
Mm.
today's guest is Joseph Joe Prey, a fifth generation funeral director from Charlotte, Michigan, who's been leading his nearly 100-year-old family business, Prey Funeral Home, with a mix of tradition and bold creativity. With over 40 years in the profession, Joe calls himself a creationeer, known for transforming funerals into deeply personal and even joyful celebrations of life. Think bowling strikes down the aisle or flyovers during a memorial. His innovative approach has earned national awards and a speaking spot at the NFDA convention. Outside of funeral service, Joe's a community leader, a pilot, a car restorer, and a family man. And today we're diving into Joe's and his legacy, his imagination, and his heart, and how he has changed the way that we honor life. Joe, welcome to the show. It is a pleasure to have you on the podcast.
Thank you. Thank you very much. Pleasure to be here.
Great. So we just like to start off just by asking you briefly. I understand that this has been in your family for generations, but what particularly made you want to become a licensed funeral director?
That's a good question because growing up in it, I grew up next door. Somebody asked me the other day, last night when we were moving stuff around here after a late visitation, and said, "When did you start?" I said, "I think I started when I was maybe 10." And that was mowing the lawn and parking cars, or not parking cars, washing cars. I couldn't move them, but I could wash them. And so I grew up in it and I couldn't imagine doing anything else.
Wow, that's awesome. Prey Funeral Home has been in your family for five generations now. I'd like to know, what does it mean to you personally to carry that on? And how have you seen things evolve during all of this time?
What does it mean to carry that on? Some days it's a blessing, some days it's a burden, but it's a burden we accept because you've got a lot of tradition with our family. 102 years this year. My granddad and my great granddad came into it years ago. Actually, bought a furniture and undertaking business down here on Main Street. So we've been at it for a long time. But the tradition part helps because people have an expectation of what we're going to do. And that's a wonderful thing because it makes it a little easier with some of the families. It's also, again, like I said, a burden because with some of the couple of the families we've had, they're like, "What are you going to do for my dad's funeral? I saw what you did for Dave. So what are we going to do now?" So
Ah,
it's fun. That is when I say fun in an appropriate manner. But
right.
yeah.
Yeah, absolutely. That's a great segue into what I want to cover next. You've described yourself as a creationeer, a creator of meaningful funeral experiences. And I'd like to know, can you explain how that title came about? And can you share an example of one of the most unique or memorable services that you've ever put on?
Oh, examples? I got lots of those. How Creation Year came about was just kind of because funeral director is we direct, but it's interesting. So many people now don't seem to appreciate that until they go out and try to do it themselves. And we do so much more than that. We get pretty creative. We use our imagination a lot. And that's how we came about with the word term creationeer. I think I had first heard that Disney. We'll give them credit for that because they have a lot of creationeers. And we said, yeah, it's what we do. We're doing a lot of different things. As an example of that, we have decided to do a number of different services that were over the top, I would say. And we've won a number of awards from ICCFA, International Cremation Cemetery and Funeral Association. What a long name. In their KIP award, keeping it personal. I think the first one we won for that was BC Collinsworth, my high school speech teacher, and Tyler Prey, my son, who works with us here in the funeral home. He had her as a teacher for drama shortly before she retired. We knew we didn't want to do anything. We wanted to do something extra special for her. Her brother was taking care of the arrangements. He wanted to do something. So we said, she was always putting kids on the stage. Let's put her on the stage. Her brother said, yeah, let's do that. So we ended up with a full theatrical production. First time I ever had to write a lighting script for a funeral, but we had a brass quintet made up of some of her colleagues, and some of her former students. We had, I think, 40 kids in a choir that were her former students as well. We had 3-part video that we had at different parts in the service just shown on a huge screen over the stage. We had several eulogists. It was really cool. And she'd always said, for one thing, she says, well, my favorite color is purple. Really? Wouldn't have guessed that because you wore purple a lot in the classroom. So we painted her casket, kick-ass purple metallic. That was actually the name of the paint color, with lime green, Camaro lime green, because she loved purple and lime green. So we put our initials on it and shaded it, and it was pretty cool. But then we also put together a number of different things. And she also said, I wanted to have popcorn in purple cups. I said, cool. So we got the popcorn machine. We had that in the lobby. We were putting it in little purple cups. Everybody took the popcorn in. We had everybody seated in the auditorium seating. It was a fabulous service. And we ended up with Michigan State's mascot, Sparty, stepping out on the stage, and the Michigan State cheerleaders running down the aisle because she was a huge Michigan State fan, as was her brother. So that was interesting. Another one was Dage Schultz. We called it Dage Parade. He was a fellow that had a team of mules, and he went all over the country with his covered wagon, the old Conestoga wagons that went out west. The pioneers settled the West in those. He went all over the country to participate in wagon trains with a number of other fans of wagon trains. So when he died, a number of those people came up, brought their wagon trains, brought their teams, and we had his procession to the cemetery. It was 2.5 hours long, but it was really cool because it was the wagon train, and we had his casket on a wagon, coincidentally, that his wife had built, which was pretty interesting. They were quite a couple. And we took him on out to the cemetery that way. You talk about flyovers. We've done those a lot of times. A low pass over the cemetery, signifying we're carrying the person's spirit on to the hereafter. Star Trek, we've done that. That was an interesting service because that was a family that wasn't necessarily going to do anything. And I said, we don't go to church. There's a lot of people don't go to church, but we still have a funeral or memorial or something because it's helpful. Yeah, we don't know. I said, let's at least write your son's obituary, because he's pretty neat. I didn't know everything about him, but there's a lot of cool things we want to share with people about that they may not know. So we started writing it. And he says, his dad says, no, he's finished all his telephone conversations in Star Trek quotes. I said, Star Trek quotes? Huh. Well, the only other Star Trek quote I ever knew was live long and prosper. He says, oh my gosh, oh no, there's all kinds of them. So he started rattling them off. I said, wow, those are, basically, I said, we can build an entire service around those. Really? Yeah, some of them sound scriptural or philosophical. That would be great to share with people, especially because your son used those all the time. No kidding. So it turned out we started talking about that. And before we got done, they said, oh yeah, this will really be neat. We're looking forward to this memorial for our son. We miss him, but we're looking forward to sharing all this with everybody else. It turned from just planning his disposition to putting together a service for him. So that's pretty cool. And that's what we do. We try to use our imagination, something a lot of my colleagues haven't quite caught up with yet. And like you say, you have to be a little bold, not too bold. Although I have had one family tell me, that was nice, but you went a little far on that one. Okay, sorry. Everybody else was, oh my gosh, this is so cool. My wife says, yeah, but that was a little over the top. I said, sorry, but okay.
So
anyway,
that's great. I think that you touched on something really important, that using this type of creative touch actually helps families in the grieving and the healing process.
Oh yeah. I mean, it goes back to Dr. John Canine. He has 7 psychological, and 7 social benefits to the funeral. I won't go through them all, but basically it says, if you're sitting home on the couch with a beer all by yourself, you're not getting over your grief, which is what a lot of people seem to want to do, especially since COVID, is they want to, nah, we don't want to gather with anybody. We're going to be fine. We're just going home. Doesn't work that way.
Yeah.
And here's an illustration. Everybody's welcome to use it. One of our guys in our staff meeting here some time ago came up with it. Grief is a journey. He didn't come up with that part. We all know that. Grief is a journey. You got to go through it. You can't go around it. You can't avoid it. You got to go through it. You got to work at it. And then we talked about it a little further. And I said, yeah, I think some of these people, Grandpa, I use this as an example at ICCFA and NFDA. Grandpa says, I don't want no funeral. Why not? You went to everybody else's funeral. You always went there. Why did he go? Why did Grandpa go? Thought it was the best thing to do, but I don't want one. I never enjoy one. Sorry. I understand. And for a lot of years, funerals didn't mean much to people who didn't have a church affiliation or whatever else, because they didn't get off on the 23rd Psalm. Nothing wrong with the 23rd Psalm, but there's a lot of people that it doesn't help because they don't understand. They didn't cultivate their faith or whatever. So now we have to reach them in a different way. Grandpa hadn't been reached on any of those. So Grandpa basically was saying, and so we said, okay, the funeral is kind of like a car. It surrounds the family, the people, the funeral director, everything we do surrounds the family and helps them along on that journey of grief, which is a long journey nobody ever wants to go on. But Grandpa's saying, I don't want you to buy that car. You can ride your bicycle. It'll get you there. It won't cost you any more. Don't have to pay for gas or anything. Okay, think of you riding your bike from Michigan to New Jersey or something like that. You may not even make it to the end of the trip. You're going to be exposed to the elements. You're not going to have any support. You're doing it all by yourself. That's hard. That's the same thing. We feel the funeral is the car helping people on that journey. And you can ride your bicycle. You can do it all on your own. I'm not sure what shape you're going to be in when you get there.
Yeah. Yeah, it's amazing. That's an amazing analogy. Thank you for that.
I have graphics for that too.
Oh, okay. So I do have a question about the ideation, the creation part. Does this just, and this is probably going to be very important for other funeral directors who actually hear this or watch this. Do you have a process for this? Is there a set of questions that you ask, or is it just like putting together the obituary and then from there it guides you to what you're going to do?
Exactly. I think our questions are pretty much very similar and the same as everybody else's when we make our, not exactly the same, but quite often they're the same as some of the other ones, which is interesting. With families, when left to their own devices to write an obituary, it usually turns out to be what I call a John. I don't know if you remember the television show Dragnet from years ago. You're probably not old enough to remember. You're
no, I do. I am. Yes.
Okay. So the key line for that one that everybody remembers from Dragnet is just the facts, ma'am. Joe Friday, just the facts, ma'am. And we have a lot of times people will write an obituary and bring it in, but it's usually just the facts. So we ask him the questions. Okay, we got where he was born. We got who he married. We got his kid's name. Tell me, how would you describe your dad to other people? I think that would be a simple question. It usually makes him stop and pause and think. Then you ask him, how would you think he would want to be? How do you think he would want to be remembered by everybody else? Makes him stop and think again. It's not always the same answer too, either, as those two questions. Then we just talk about their hobbies, their interests, what they did for their job. what made them tick. And usually in those things, there's 2 or 3 things that pop out at us. Service we have today in a little bit, and make arrangements with that family. I said, so what? Another question would be, what were some of the pleasant memories you had from your family that you might want to, we could build a service around? One of the sons says, oh man, peanut butter fudge and popcorn on Sunday night, watching Mutual of Omaha's Wild Kingdom and The Wonderful World of Disney. I thought, oh, that was cool. That was my same thing. I did that when I was a kid. So when they came in, we had the popcorn popper running, and we were popping popcorn for everybody at the funeral or at the visitation. That was pretty neat. So you look for those little things, like the guy, the Star Trek quotes. That's an idea. We can build on that. The key part is using your imagination. And I tell you, sometimes that's hard, especially when you're making arrangements at 3:30 in the afternoon. You've already had 2 funerals that day. You've probably been out on a house call. And you just kind of want to sit down and get the fact. Can you just give me the facts so I can write this obituary? Sorry, no, that's not going to work. That's going to end up with either, number one, an unsatisfying service or no service at all because they don't see any value. So you have to basically use your brain. And some of the things are pretty easy to say, oh, there's a good one. The bowling, we set up the bowling balls or the bowling pins, and we rolled the ball down the aisle at the end of the service because the kid was one of my contemporaries. He was in a bowling league and loved it. He was also in a pool league. So we had the pool table in the back of the chapel, and they were shooting pool.
Oh, wow.
Yeah.
That's amazing.
Experience. Just think of experiences and use your imagination, and don't be afraid to be a little bold about it.
Yeah. I love it.
And if your staff says, oh my gosh, what are we going to do now? Then you got 2 things. You can be pleased that you're challenging them, or you may want to say, I got to get new staff. But we're lucky. We've had everybody on our staff is like, they'll say, oh, what do we do now? And most of the time they're like, that's going to be cool. And we go ahead and get it done.
That's amazing. That's amazing. I know that outside of the funeral home, you've been very active in your community. You've served as the Chamber of Commerce president. You were a founder in Charlotte Rising. So I'm curious, how have these community endeavors influenced the way that you approach your funeral services? Have they influenced you in any way?
Ooh, how have they? They've influenced us from the standpoint of, number one, the reason we're involved in a community is because it's our community. We want the community to be viable, because if it's not viable, everybody's going to move away, and I got nobody to take care of. So number one, you have to be involved in your community. And another thing is, you want to make sure that people see that you're giving back. We do. We give back. We support a lot of it. And that's important to me. And I think that's important to a number of families we serve. And that's one of the things that has helped us combat the thought that the old stereotype of the funeral director is just out to get as much money as he can from you. No, we do charge for our services. But part of the reason we charge for our services is because we give a lot of our time and treasure away to the community to support them. They support us, we support them.
That's right.
But that's important. Yeah.
Yeah, absolutely. So let's talk about something that I think a lot of people are talking about these days, and that's the use of technology in this very traditional profession, right? So we know that this profession is rooted in tradition, but it's also been adapting to modern times. So have you found any ways to integrate new technology into the services?
Oh, yes. Way back years ago, when somebody said, oh, you ought to be webcasting your funeral, we're like,
Yeah.
do that.
Yeah.
But we found out, and we were one of the first adopters. We were early adopters of that. We didn't invent it or anything, but we picked up a lot of the equipment, a lot of the know-how. We had a few folks in the profession that helped us.
That's amazing.
And so we got that. We started doing that way years ago, which amazed me when COVID came along and a lot of funeral homes had never done it. Oh my gosh, we're going to webcast during COVID. So we've been doing that for, I don't know, 10 or 15 years. Okay, we know how to do that. Just the Zoom part to me is still amazing that we can talk across the country. Webcasting is along those lines. We've made arrangements using the computer. We were forced to during COVID, which worked out in most cases very well. But we didn't come up with a lot of the cool imaginative things at that point, because we weren't really in the same room. There isn't the same energy. We've done a lot we love putting together stuff on our website. We try to put things on there. My website, people keep saying, Joey, you're putting too much on there. We have to scale that back. Just the little videos and YouTube stuff that we've been able to put up there. We had a young man who was a videographer that came in, and we sat here in this room and we did a lot of videos on different questions. We've got those all up on our YouTube channel. We've had a lot of, and then Facebook. Oh my gosh, Facebook, Instagram, TikTok, all those other platforms are amazing to me that they reach so many people. Now, you do see a lot of trash on there, stuff that's not worth your time looking at, or misinformation. But we try to put everything up in an honest manner and kind of help it. But yeah, I'd like to use more technology. We've used a projector and TVs on the walls and all that. We're looking at moving into other replacements for those bigger screens, maybe a whole video wall, that kind of stuff. The only constraint I think any of us have is how much does it cost, and how much will my bookkeeper let me pay for it?
Yeah. The good thing is that it's becoming more and more inexpensive as time goes.
You're right.
There's definitely going to be more opportunity for all of this.
Oh yes.
Yeah.
That's right.
Have you played with AI at all?
Yes. But I'm still a little leery of how you can actually use it respectfully. We've used it to help write some obituaries, and we've experimented. We've helped our current provider for our website services and everything. We've helped them with their module and looked at that and experimented with that. I said, oh, give it to me. I'll break it for sure. I didn't break it yet. And yeah, we've used AI in that. We've used AI for some imaging, but I'm one of those people that even though I keep reading about how we should be using it, I still don't really quite understand how its full capability can come into use in funeral service. Maybe it's because I'm 67 years old and I'm on the backside of the curve of everything, but
no, I think you're in the same boat as a lot of people, but we're definitely entering a new era. This is going to change. I believe this is going to change things the way the internet changed the world.
Oh yeah, more than likely. Yeah.
And based on this conversation, I feel that you are a very gifted person. You have an ability to imagine and create, right? Unfortunately, not everybody does, and some people are in your position. And what I'm curious to see is how those people could leverage AI to come up with these ideas.
That is a good thing. I know we've used it when we first started fussing with it. We kind of used AI. Let's see what an AI brainstorming session looks like. We typed in a bunch of things and it came out with, wow,
yeah,
that's pretty good.
Yeah.
We could probably write an entire business plan on there. And we've tried with a couple other things. So that is a good, you can use it to kind of make a roadmap for yourself. The hard part though is still, like I was using it to create some images, and there's a learning curve to that, depending upon what you're using, because I was using it to put together images, a couple of which we've shared, and that kept coming. When I said anything about a funeral, it kept coming up with pictures of zombies.
Yeah.
Oh, zombies aren't at the funeral. So it's like,
it's still learned.
Yeah.
Yeah. That's true. That's true. Yeah. I think it'll eventually get it right. And I think I'm just curious to see what the future holds and how the role it's going to play in funeral services and in general. I'm curious, inspiration, right? Inspiration for funeral professionals out there, now that we're talking about this, the use of AI, how to brainstorm, how to come up with ideas. You've been doing this for over 4 decades now. What advice or insights would you share with young funeral directors or mortuary science students that are just starting out? Maybe some lessons from your own journey.
Don't be stuck in the stereotypical funeral.
Absolutely.
Don't necessarily try to wreck it. Don't necessarily try to replace it. The Catholic funeral is a highly ritualized service, and that has great meaning for those who understand the Mass. But you also have to interject. We have a Catholic Mass today. The crew, the staff is down there taking care of that. But last night we had a visitation in here, and they had all the mom's snacks. We had all those things sitting in the other room. And we had those. We had the display of things. You have pictures. People use pictures and all kinds of stuff they bring in now. Key off those. Work on those. Look at those. And don't be afraid to use your imagination. That's the key thing to anybody being successful. Because as I mentioned, I've done a number of interviews with our local TV station and other folks, and it always comes around to, I want a party. Great, we can have a party. Like I mentioned before, the party we've always had. It's usually the luncheon afterwards. But now we brought a lot of these things in, the celebratory parts, into the funeral. Some people call it a life celebration. Some people call it a memorial. So we have a term that we use, family affirmation service, which we trademarked because we wanted to have something different to make people think about differently. And it's worked because but you have to use your imagination. Don't be afraid to make suggestions. The worst they can do is say no. And the most frustrating thing they can say is, that's a cool idea, but now we're not going to do that. It's like, why not? And if you do that, it doesn't have to be over the top and big all the time. Could be the popcorn that we served at visitation last night for the second family we were taking care of. Could have been just the snack bar that the family had for the other visitation last night. Those are simple things, but it brings a smile to the people's faces. And let's see. Oh, and for an example, another one, rolling the bowling ball down the aisle at the end. It was simple. I told the family we ought to do that. And when we did do that, you know what happened? Everybody stood up and applauded for our buddy's last strike. So
that's amazing.
That's cool. That's what we do. We have a lot of, and when people say, oh my gosh, I don't like visitation. So don't like going to the funeral home. It's so morbid, so dark. If they're saying that about your place, I think you got some work to do. Change the lights, put in windows, something like that. But my response usually is, have you ever been to a funeral at our place? Have you ever been to a visitation at our place? They're not all a riot, but in most funeral homes, I think nowadays, the visitation is not quite raucous, but they're loud, they're telling stories, they're laughing about those stories. Yes, there's tears, and that's all part of it, but telling the story and sharing all those things brings a smile to the person's face, the family's face. So that's what it's about. Use your imagination. Don't be afraid to use a little humor. Not over the top. I've done that before too. But that's the way it goes. You just have to be brave, be bold, be creative.
That's
and
awesome.
Compassionate. You can't do anything unless they're honest and they feel that you really care about them and that you're doing everything you can for them. And we've been lucky. We have a great staff that exudes that.
That sounds wonderful. Curious, if anyone out there would like to get in touch with you, what would be the best way to reach you?
I'd say email. But
the average adult, I think, gets over 200 emails per day. So it's hard to sift through that. Yeah.
I try to clean mine out and I still got 38,000 emails in here.
All right.
No wonder Google says I've used up all my space. But yeah, I'd say either email or call me at the funeral home.
Great.
Those are the two easiest ways to get a hold of me. You've probably got my number there, 517-543-2950. And my My email address is jpray, JPRAY, @prayfuneral.com.
Joe, thank you so much. This has been enlightening, informative, fun. You've got my wheels turning, and I'm sure that everyone who listens to this and watches this is really going to get a lot of value from it. So I'd just like to thank you for joining us, for being here again. Thank you.
Very welcome. Thanks.
Have a good one.